7, 6. Hey gang, we're here at another live painting session. This is, I think, week 17, and I'm tackling something maybe I shouldn't tackle today because it's a little bit more complex, but I figured let's give it a shot. Years ago, I started painting vineyard workers, and I used to go out on the harvests, and it was wonderful. And go early in the morning and roll around on the ground, and these guys were picking all around me and loading into bins. And so I started doing a series of quick photography. I mean, I don't know what quick. Yeah, actually it was quick because they were moving very fast. And so then I would come home and start doing figuring out some compositions and do paintings. So I thought I'd tackle one of those today. I haven't done them for a while, but I'm just going to put one figure in. I'm going to edit out a couple of things. And I did a very quick linear kind of indication. I think it's about right. I'm not sure. I really can't tell till I get shapes down. And with that, I think we're going to start getting some shapes down. And I'm going to kind of mess y'all up today because I'm going to start with this brush. Usually I start with this brush, but I'm going to start with this today. All right. So I always, as you guys have probably heard in the past, I always work from back to front. So I'm going to get a little bit of that where that sky happens in. It's very almost a white blue, and just gonna kind of dry, working on a piece of hardboard here that I've gessoed up with a little bit of a tone on it, and we just get kind of these approximations of where the sky sits. And you can hear that I'm painting pretty dry. I'm not painting it's not real wet. That's for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is I know I'm going to paint over it. And if I have super wet paint, it's going to cause a problem. So it's almost like a scumble, which means scumble is basically it's applying paint in a dry fashion. So that's basically it. So we're going to start with a little bit of sky up there. And then we're going to kind of work some of these simple tones back behind, and I'm going to be using a lot of Naples yellow. I'll go over my palette very quickly while I'm working. I titanium white, as I always do, Naples yellow, yellow ochre. This time I added a little cad yellow in there because I knew I could see I was going to need some good yellows. So I'm not going with the strong yellows right now. This is more of the Naples, and it's almost Naples direct. It's a little bit of white mixed into it, but it's very close to almost Naples direct. The white just mellows it out, so there's a little bit more. And all we're going to do is kind of indicate kind of where some of this background foliage is. Now I could be using the other brush. I decided I'd use my Rosemary Flat 12 here, number 12, and so I could have been doing it with that simple little gesso brush, but for some reason, I just decided. I mean, a lot of the brushes that I pick, there is logic, believe me. I don't want to make it sound like it's just willy-nilly, but either one would work in this case. I'm going to switch over to the other brush. I think I'm going to keep the lighter colors with this brush and the darker colors more with my gesso brush. That will speed things up a little bit. So here's kind of some of that yellow back in there. Then we've got down below it kind of almost a raw sienna kind of a color. It looks like I'm going to need a little white mixed in with that raw sienna. And going to test it, always test it. And that's just about where I want it. So we're just going to add a little Terp to it because the paint felt a little bit stiff. And we're just going to kind of I don't want sharp edges. Definitely do not want sharp edges at this particular time. If I want a little variation, I'll pick up a little cad red light and throw that into it, maybe a little alizarin later on. But right now, I just want to kind of get a groundwork so I have something to build upon. One of the things that I haven't mentioned in the past, some of these past demos, is every time you're painting, until you're finishing, you are setting up for the next layer. So keep that in mind. It's not, you're not doing the finish. I added a little alizarin into that, but you're not doing the finish. So what you're always doing, I'm getting rid of this one figure, by the way. You're always setting up for that next layer. It gets a little darker, so I'm going to throw more alizarin and a little bit of the asphaltum or umber, whichever you prefer, into that area up front. Not dark enough, so I'm going to throw a little bit more ultramarine in to get it a little darker, right about in here. And it's still not as dark as I want it. That's okay, because I don't want a red underneath it. So throwing a little bit more alizarin into that will kind of push that red down around in here. I can take a little bit of the cad red light. I constantly mix back and forth, you guys. So that's a little cad red light thrown into it. Same color. Haven't mixed a new color. It just, everything's been out of, with the exception of this, everything's pretty much on the ground, been out of one specific, I refer to it as a pot of color. So it's not like I'm sitting there coming up with new, it's just augmenting pretty much the color that I have down. You take that same kind of color and I see some nice reds over in here. So let's kind of get a little bit of a red moving around in here. And keep in mind that line that that you're always setting up for that next stage. This is a setup. This is not the finish. So a lot of times people watch and they think, oh my God, what is he doing? And I tell you that because I was one of those. And I never quite understood it until I started painting a lot myself. Then I really began to understand that, well, just because you put something down doesn't mean it's going to stay exactly like that. It's going to go through stages. And the first stage tends to feel a little freer, a little bit more abstract. You want your values, and I know I've mentioned this in the past, you really want your values correct. And that's really what I'm looking. If the color is a little off, I'm not as concerned, but I do want those values correct. And we're going to put, let's see how that dark, it's a little too red. I'm throw a little more blue into it, mix a little white into it. I didn't switch over to that other brush. I like it. So we're kind of laying, excuse me?
What brush are you using?
I'm saying I'm still using the Rosemary number 12 flat. I have not switched from it. In the beginning, very seldom, whether I'm using the that little gesso brush that I showed you, or whether I'm using something like this, I really don't switch around with a lot of brushes until I really need to. I just try and stay as big with the brush as I possibly can for as long as I can. And I've been asking, so how do you learn how to work with a big brush? And the answer is, I work with a big brush. It's that simple. And it was really a wonderful instructor that I had that said, if the brush you're working with feels comfortable, go larger. And what he means by that is, as you're kind of getting going, your background, as mine was, is in drawing. And what do we draw with? We draw with something like this. Look at the difference in the size of it. My word. So you automatically feel your comfort zone is with a small tip. And it's really helpful if you get out of that comfort zone and not be afraid. And the biggest thing you can overcome in the beginning is fear. Fear of failure, fear of doing it wrong. You're going to do it wrong. I guarantee you, no matter how careful you are, you're going to do it wrong. It's the nature of the beast. Get used to it and move on from there. Because once you kind of get over that, laying in some of the darker darks that I see. But once you get over that, your growth will occur. I'm trying to think of the exact words. You will find yourself improving. In the beginning, it may feel a little clumsy, I see a cooler, lighter color. That's why you see me kind of, and I'm approximating it. I don't know if I'm right on, but you know what? The color that I'm laying down will come through somewhere, and it actually will help, whether I'm right or whether I'm 100% off. Initially, if I just get something down there, I can adjust. I know I can. And it goes back to that line. I use it every week. It's only wrong if you leave it. You're gonna get really tired of hearing that if you watch too many of these, because I say it over and over because I mean it. In other words, it's only wrong if you leave it, because you're going to do wrong things. As I said, you're going to do some things that just aren't right. And you keep going over it. You keep layering over all these mistakes till you don't have any more mistakes. And as some people always ask, how do you know when you're done? You're done when all your mistakes are done. You don't see any more mistakes. Now, the problem with that is that 2 days later, you might see mistakes. So that's why I usually like the idea of laying off a painting and not sitting on a painting forever. I just find it works for me. That's why I work on more than one piece at a time generally. Like I said, these are like giant studies. So these are like, don't be deceived in thinking that this is how fast you paint. These are studies. These are like big, giant studies. Process is the same. You just, as I've mentioned many times, you spend more time evaluating. You spend more time thinking about. A lot of color mixing that I'm doing right now is based on experience, and it's more intuitive. I always like to use intuitive, but intuitive isn't always right. So sometimes I need to go back, and that's where the evaluation process comes in. You evaluate, you realize there's certain things that are not correct, and that's when you get in there and you take care of it. So we got a little bit, kind of enough of this background. There's some trees back here too. I'm going to lay them in back with a little green, I don't want to spend too much time. I want to get into the meat of the painting, which is this. The trees are somewhere in here. Oh, that's not too bad. Throw a little more ochre into it. That's not too bad. It's good enough to start with. And I still use this brush much the same as I use that little gesso brush. So I'm not still just kind of letting the brush and bristles do the work. I'm not trying to power my will into what I'm doing. Values look pretty good. It's a little darker than I want, but I may make that the dark of the tree and add some lights to it later. Again, let the brush do the work. Don't overpower that tool. If you are working too hard at it, chances are your piece is a little bit overworked, over-rendered. So there's kind of the gist of those trees back there. Okay, and it looks like there's a little bit right up here. I twist the brush, let it go down differently each time, because leaves aren't uniform. Foliage is not uniform. Okay, so we've got that background. Now we're going to lay a little bit of a big kind of a dark green. I'm going to use the sap. Sap's a beautiful color for that. I'm mixing it back into this color, adding a lot of terp to it because I really want it to kind of flow. Yeah, that's good. It's nice because I know I can go darker and I know I can go brighter. So this is a kind of a nice color to start with. We're going to go in here, down here, and then we're going to work our way over kind of where his hands are. And I'm going to get a little darker. I'm going to take more asphaltum and a little blue and mix it right into that green color. Maybe add a touch more green into it. So you can see right now, see how much darker that is? So I can get kind of this dark mass of deep foliage in shadow. And it comes down kind of in here. It's a lot going on in this, by the way. I got to pick something next week easy. I think I'll do a stream. We're still working on the still life idea, and we talked about it a little bit as to how to set one up. So I may end up with that. Could end up with a stream. Could end up with a portrait. It's part of it is how I feel going into it. So we've got a little bit of that now. I can see some really neat things happening. Right, coming. Sound effects help. And what you're doing with that is you're creating this perspective going back in space. Kind of neat. Okay. All that's pretty good indication. This is just going to be a nice dark. So I'm going to go with my darkest dark, Asphaltum in blue. That's just the ultramarine. It's as dark as I can go. The only thing I can do to enhance it is add a little bit of alizarin. Those are all the darkest colors on my palette. And I'm going to start here. And I'm going to take that. I'm going to bring it up. It's another branch comes over here. And there's the knotty part of this where it twists and kind of comes towards you. So we're going to get a little bit of that in there too. And then there's a branch I can see right now that works its way. Comes this way and down to where almost his other hand is. Okay, and there's some darks back in here. So I'm going to take a little bit more of that green, throw it right back into that same color because it's really dark, and push a little bit of dark activity that I begin to see back in here. Okay. Maybe a little bit up in here so we get a little variation. All right, I'm going to hold off on this. It'll be one of the very last things I do, along with the coming out the back. Now let's get into a little bit of the figure here. But before I do, there's a figure back behind him there, and I do need to get a tone back in there because I'm eliminating that figure, and it has to be dark enough. So I'm going to start with kind of a raw sienna and a little bit of some of these other colors that I've kind of added into this. Maybe a little bit of cad red light. We're going to kind of get this dark. It looks like there's some light that I can see happening back in there too. Looking in the front of his leg, I'm seeing a little bit of a grayer color. So I'm using colors I have mixed up. I'm not remixing anything right now. And we'll do some light happening across that. And that's going to come across here. So it's going to come across in here. Maybe sneak back in here, get a little bit of variation. So we get some distance back in there. It's got a lot of blue in it. I don't mind the color variation. In fact, sometimes I like it to happen. I'm going to set that brush down for a second, pick up a smaller, this time I have a filbert. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a little bit of what goes on behind his head. And I'm going to brighten it up more than it shows here because I want his head to pop up. So sometimes there's reasons that you might augment and change a little bit of what's going on because after all, it is foliage. And almost anything can happen. Light could be coming from almost anywhere. So I'm kind of using a little bit of it back in here. I want to bring a little bit of the little of the green as it kind of comes and overlaps back down in here. Even back over the branch a little bit. And we'll get more of the green going on. I'm going to go more of a blue-green here. Overlapping in here a little bit. A little lighter. Again, I'm having to make quick decisions here. So up in here. So we want, every time you see me mix a different green, I'm probably going to move it around to a couple of areas so that we get, all the greens that I use are not the same. Okay. A little activity going on there. His other arm is right there. There's also, it looks to me to be a branch right back in here. Can't tell if that's a branch or that's the other gentleman's arm. These guys are moving like, they remind me sometimes of dancers because they go from one area to another and they're very fleet of foot. They're not spending hardly any time because they're paid by the pound. Really interesting. Learned a lot living here in the wine country and doing some of this stuff. It's really interesting. You learn quite a bit about it. I'm gonna have some more up in here above his hat, but I need to start with some darks on him. So I'm gonna again go to my darkest dark, blue, and the asphaltum. Mix a little medium with it because I can feel the paint's a little stiff, and we're going to start with the dark of his pants. Nope, it's a little too brown, so I mix more blue back into that. And if it goes too blue, then I'll throw a little alizarin. But we're going to go that way, and then come down, and we're going to fill this all in. We're going to come down on his knee. Looks to be about here, maybe here, and then comes down to his leg. Disappears. Got to get more blue into that. I can tell right now. There we go. Back of that leg. Let's get rid of some right up in there. Comes down underneath the bin. Same dark. I'm use the same dark. Saves me time, and it's the way it is. You don't want to separate things too much. Right? Push things together design-wise. Then if you need to towards the end, you can add that separation if you need it. Okay. So it comes up. That looks about right. Feels pretty good. I might have his legs a little bit short. This is where drawing, this is where you draw with shape. The shape is your drawing. And if that's the case, I'm probably a little bit high there, which is okay. There's the back side of it, the interior. If you got that color and it's in more than one place, don't waste time. Use the color you got. Use the value you got, even if the color's not. So paint this one. Back behind. Paint sloppy at first, neat at the end. Energy, then control. This is the energy component. It feels a little high on him. That's okay. I'm going to change some things. I can see right now his arm should be about here. And I have it all the way back in there, which just means I'm going to have more stuff going on in there. Let's get the shadow of this character. The shadow on his jacket, which is lighter, can be broken down in like 2 or 3 different zones. And I'm going to start with what I call kind of the middle dark zone, which is blue, asphaltum, and white. Okay. I don't want the shadows to be quite as dark as they appear. It's a little bit overexposed as a photograph. So we're going to get that arm in. Shadow down in there, across his back. I'd rather paint the shadows in way too large and be forced to overlap over them. Let's see here. Right, if I look right there and go straight down, so if I look right there and go straight up, that's where his cup is. So it's about here. And then these shadows on his arm. So we start with a unifying shadow tone. All right, in other words, I'm not trying to mix all these incredible, beautiful variations that I see. I may want to end up there, but I don't want to start there. So if we start with that, now we're going to go back to, I'm going to clean that brush pretty good. I want to stay with this brush this one right now. I don't want to switch to smaller, and I don't want to go to a bigger. So I went back to the blue and the brown, and we're going to put his head in. He's wearing a hat that sits under a lot of foliage. And this, we're slowing down, we're bringing a little bit more control to it. Also, I can begin to see my proportions at this point. Up to this point, I was guessing. Now I can begin to be a little bit more accurate in my proportions. And it looks pretty good. I'm going to tell you when I do stuff that sucks. Right now it looks okay. That looks about right. It's not as refined as I want it, but I don't care. I want it to be refined at the end. If it isn't refined now, I can live with that. Going to go back to the blue, the brown. Make sure I get that hat in, and the visor of his hat. This is where you really got to study your reference. Is that down about in here? It's a lot of overlapping of foliage, and then the hat sits up here behind a lot of foliage. All right, and then he has a little piece of light here and there on his face, which we'll kind of play with that a little bit, but pretty much I want the silhouette in the beginning. The back arm tends to be in deep shadow at this point. And there's a little light on it at the end, which I am going to use that too. I do like that. Nature offers you things, whether you're painting a landscape, whether you're painting a figure in a landscape, there are things that it's offering. And by offering, I mean that it's there for the taking and you use it. And if things aren't working out, you get to be the designer. You get to be a little bit of the creative force here. If things aren't quite the way you want them, you can augment them, darken them, lighten them, get rid of them. I will tend to get rid of more things than I will add. Fold, a little bit of a pull, right about there. And you notice how I pulled the brush. A little bit of it, and we're being a little bit more controlling now. And the shoulder gets a little warmer. So I actually took, it's a cat orange, and I'm going to mix a little alizarin into it, so it comes out to and I'm just going to push that so it goes a little darker and a little warmer right there, right? Nah, it didn't go darker, it went warmer. So I threw some asphaltum into it. There we go. I love painting folds. Never knew that about myself until I was doing an old illustration piece, and it was the back of a little boy, and he had a jacket on. There were all kinds of folds, and I really got into doing it. And then that's how you discover things you like. It's the same way I discovered that I like doing reflections. Did a few and liked it, came out pretty good. So that's how we learn anything, you guys. We do it, and if you do it well, generally you like it. If you do it poorly, you kind of go. And I advise everybody, when you do things poorly, don't give up on those things. Do more of them, so you can learn them. You can learn how to do them. Really important. Okay, so we're getting some of those shadow folds in there. A little bit, and the arm, underside of that arm goes darker. So I took some alizarin and mixed it into that color, and it's getting, and think about it, it's getting more reflective light, where the top of him is getting more skylight. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a little bit. because it's really kind of cool. And then he gets obviously the interruption of sunlight. So I've mixed color variations into that color. I don't know if you guys can see, it's starting to actually work. And I'm pleased with that. Obviously, I mean, I still am not sure about my proportion. I am going to lighten back in here, a little bit thicker, pure Naples. I picked up, that's pure Naples, and you can see how thick it is. And I'm just kind of buttering it on. Look at that, big gooey gob of Naples. Sounds like a song. Gooey gob of Naples. I entertain myself a lot like that. I don't sing, but so I do sing. I just sing really bad. And I will not stress anybody out with any of my vocals. It's weird. All three of my kids can sing quite well. My sister is excellent, very good singer. And I am a lover of good singers. But obviously I didn't develop that muscle. And so I'm a one-trick pony. I paint. Kind of get back in there, sculpt the area around the glove. Any of the little darks, have fun. Just every now and then, I'll just go back every now and then and just find a little thing that I'm have fuss with and just put a few strokes in there and then leave it alone and go to another area. I didn't always do that, but I'm very good about doing that now. I do not dwell on any one area generally too long. It's probably why I do these demo things, because I move from area to area. And where are we sitting? We're sitting about 30 minutes into it. So I feel okay. I always say that, and then I realize as I move along, I need more time and I need more time. And so we'll get the best we can done in the hour and a half that I have to entertain myself. And it's interesting, something I found about myself, and I've told this to people, the faster that I paint, I tend to paint thicker. And I think it's because I'm correcting. And to correct, you need to kind of be a little bolder. And so sometimes when I'm painting really fast, I can get super, I call them gooey paintings. And it's funny because artists tend to love those. I don't know if the public does, but the artists tend to love those little gooey, juicy types of paint strokes. And I'm adding some of that in there now. You can see I'm constantly going back and finding variations that I can put in. It's just something that I think we all need to kind of concentrate on and not over. It's a lot of little darks, warm darks, and not over analyze everything we're doing as we're doing it. You do have to analyze, trust me. But as you're doing it, trust yourself a little bit. Maybe every 5-10 minutes, get back and see if you were right. Because you might not, do it, I would say every five minutes or so. And the reason being, you guys think about this. So let's say you put 30 minutes into something, you step back and you realize that you didn't make something, you made something too dark. You made something too bright. Well, you just wasted that 30 minutes or so. So why not step back every 5 after you make some judgment calls. This is what I need to do. You do it. Then get back and see if those judgment calls were right. If they're not, you've only kind of invested 5 minutes, and you can go and do whatever adjustments you need. Then step back again. Once you got it right, then proceed. there's a lot about painting, I believe, realistic painting, particularly. Not, I won't say this about abstract, but it's a little bit about abstract. There's a lot about it that is just logic. I mean, you know, it's like when I play around and I do something right, I think to myself, why the hell didn't I think of that? Of course, that's what it should be. And instead of fussing and doing things, and all of a sudden, when you do something right like that, it becomes, if you keep that in your memory, your muscle memory, so to speak, chances are you won't forget that, and you'll be able to apply it next time. And so that's how we eliminate mistakes. Because when we first all start painting, if you're like me, you just make tons of mistakes. Do it wrong, did it sloppy, wrong color. You look at it later and you go, oh my God, why did I do that? And after a while, you start doing it right, and it kind of stays in your brain. And he's got a little, I like that little piece of red. It's a little, I think it's a bandana, and they keep it sometimes in their pocket, but it's a nice little splash of red that's happening there. And that's why I put it in. Like I said, you use what's there and you eliminate. So I eliminated the figure. I mainly eliminated him because I couldn't quite tell what he was doing. And it was just another element that was going to take me some more time. And the same is true with the background figure. Now, that one I could have done. That guy I could have done, but I didn't. So I'm going to finish up his back here. We haven't put light on him, you notice? Haven't had any light hit him yet. Everything is, he's in deep, and that's, I tell my students, get ready and then turn the lights on. And that's kind of what I look at this towards the end. I kind of turn the lights on. He has a little bit of light on his pants. I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to go down to the bins. This bin has got a lot of beautiful light behind it. One of the things I love about painting this subject matter is you can play with abstract thick paint and a lot of color, and get a lot of interesting variations going on. So that's behind this particular, I think I got it in the right spot. It also looks like it goes over and it has a little bit of, and you can pull his pants out a little bit more by just adding a little bit of light there. And I can really bring it back up in here and intensify it. Nothing's really intensified very strong. Now, to stay with this brush, I'm going to mix up a very blue-gray color that's a little light. I want it to be lighter than that, but I don't want it to be too light because I want it to stay in shadow. That looks about right. And we're painting the lip on this bin. These bins, they fill with grapes. A little bit of control so that those first strokes you saw me put in were really kind of just slopped in there. Now I'm bringing a little bit of logic to it, a little bit more understanding as to what that is. But in the beginning, don't worry about it.
Laurel would like to know if there's a general principle for the number of color variations within a specific value area.
No, there is not. In other words, you want the idea that, I mean, you know, you can go back and you can say there's basically most paintings can be broken down into 5 basic values, not colors, but, and I always talk value, not color. But within those values, there may be subtle variations, and it's the subtle variations that really kind of add the character. But if you don't get those basic 5 values in there, no matter what you do, it's like that's a value. In those background trees, I'm only going to have 2 values. That's probably going to be the dark value. All right. You can have 30 I mean, you can have so many variations. The problem is you got to put them in at the right time. If you try and sneak all these color and value variations in too soon, it doesn't work. It's got to relate to basic overall light value, shadow value. Then you worry about any color nuances. Color nuances happen later. So we've got kind of the bins. I could strike a little light on that one. I haven't, they're okay. I could easily put another 20 minutes into literally those bins. They have stains. I'm just catching it now as I'm looking. They have stains, so I can actually come in with, it almost doesn't matter, but and just pull some stains down in there. Then leave it alone. I don't want to go too far with it. If I go too far, too fast, I kind of what happens is you go too far too quickly and you realize you're wrong. Then once again, as I said earlier, you realize, look all the time you've wasted because you were wrong. So why not kind of get your base values in there, get them correct, then build off those. Build off those. I don't know that I really answered that question properly. There is not a given number, but many artists, and I don't disagree with this, can work with the concept of 5 basic values that hold your painting together. 1 middle value, 2 in the shadow side, 2 in the light side. So, but then there's subtle variations within those, and that's where the fun happens. But if you don't get those in there to begin with, you might as well hang it up because nothing's going to work. I'm trying to get this guy's nose. Oh, I got a nose in there. Son of a gun. Okay, so we got a nice silhouette. The silhouette's working okay. Happy with that. Got to get kind of the gloves in shadow and warmer and light. Oh, son of a gun, pretty close. Always shocked when I put something down for the first time and it's really almost exactly what I want. Doesn't happen that often. Usually I have to go 2 or 3 times. Again, part of that's that evaluation process that I talked about. You want to evaluate that as you're doing it. And like you can bring that glove out as I see with what's behind it. That's that Naples yellow, and there's another little piece up in here. So you can start to see, you're starting to get a little vibration going on in there. Okay. I like to think of it as good vibration. A little homage to the Beach Boys. So we got a little bit of that going on. Maybe I'll take a little bit of grab a smaller, oh here, let's grab this little tiny long bristle filbert or egbert, and we'll go in and just pop in a few little lights back behind his head, lighter than it's showing right now. If I brush it too much, it blends into the paint. I almost have to just kind of lay that brush down, just like bring a little orange to it, a little fun color variation. I don't want to get into that. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I would get into towards the end and really start playing with wonderful little fun color nuances and things. But right now we got to keep on track. So I get this thing done looking like it's done. Let's get a little, I kind of like this gooey paint, man. I don't know if you guys can see it, but we're talking thick. Piece of light. So I don't know if you guys can see this at present, but to me, it's beginning to take on a little bit of life. And a lot of that is color vitality and a little bit of control. I really haven't done any modeling into him yet. Really, I want to see something right there. That's the back foot. That comes down. Okay. One of the things I want to get into is I have to get enough of this greenery so that I can hit his back. But I also need to kind of go back and dance around a little bit on this so it isn't just a flat tone. So I'm going to take some ochre I can see. Just pure ochre. And I'm going to look at the bump and I'm going to go straight across and I see a lot of color variation. I'm going to mix some Naples back into that because it was, to me, it was standing out just a little too much. And I just want to let the brush do the work. As we're adding warms, little, and I'm almost dry brushing that paint on because I want it to skip. I don't want that paint to go down as a firm, because I feel texture in that area. I don't feel big, chunky paint strokes. Now, that's my intent. If I wanted to, I could go boom, stuff like that, and make it work as long as I did that everywhere. So I messed that up. And we'll come in with a little bit of just kind of moving that paint around a little bit. I'll fix that in a second. That's pretty good. It's starting to take on what I wanted it to. I think that this initial color can move up. I've got a little green mixed into it by accident, but you know what? It's going to work. There is some green there. So wasn't my intent, but it works. Happy accidents, people. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit more flavor to it by adding a little green to that color. Took my sap, took my ochre, took my Naples. I don't want it too dark. I was kind of thinking that might be too dark. So I threw some more Naples into it. And we're just going to do the same thing here where I'm just going to feel it across. Comes kind of off his back. He has some, and go a little darker. Has a little hanging down here, a little darker. Hangs down. Goes up. And mixing dirt, kind of other dirty colors into it. So as I'm painting, I'm saying, no, that can go a little darker. So what I'm doing is I'm just picking up little darks, kind of intuitively. And I can come back over this with lights, which will really help it a lot. So I'm building the feeling of the texture that I need back there. I don't want to dwell on it. Now I'm going to lay in those, I was going to call them stems, but they're not, the vines that are actually coming out of the ground. It's kind of a blue-gray. It's a little darker, a little bit of more warm. And let's start with that post. And I think I have that post about here, if I'm not mistaken. I left it. And go a little darker, because I'm judging that based on the ground plane that's behind it. So there we go. A little more blue into it. It's a little bit on the warm side. Hit it one more time. And now I'm going to go off to the left of that, and there's a vine, and I'm just kind of feeling my way through this. About there. Coming down on this side a little thicker. I like to paint more structural, more short strokes lines. And there's a nice thin, spindly young vine right in between, right about here. And then there's one off to the side, which I had sketched in, but it was in there wrong. So we're going to kind of put it in like that. And then there's background. And then we've got a guy picking there. So I've just got to kind of look and see what's happening and say, okay, I can put another thin vine in here and maybe another, and this I'm just making up. Okay. And I can see perspectively, it goes like that. So this has to come down to about here. This to here. So I get that kind of perspective flavor. And then there's a vine off to the right of that. It's coming closer to us. So we're going to make it a little bit darker. And it's right about there. And then another little vine off to the side. And then the other thing that we got to remember is you got these back behind. So I'm going to go back to this little filter here. A lot more Terp into it because I want them kind of pale. I'm going to put these vines way back in the distance that I see. There, and one. there. And there are ones even behind those, way back there. So we're getting that distance. And I don't want these as dark as the vines in the foreground. We get a lot of depth back in here. You can see them go way back. One back here. One about right. You try and get them in there correctly the first time. I know I'm not, but I'll come close enough where it should look okay. And then one a little bit closer. Then there's some way back in here, way back. And we're trying to get that distance. So it's starting to work. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to add a little light to those things. And there's little pieces of light that's happening. And I want to get a little bit more white in that. Almost the Naples. We're going to start with this one. Get a little light on it. And I need to add a little medium to this because it's not standing out the way I want it to. So that's got to be really strong. There, it hits down at the base. You see that little piece of light there? Right at the base. One next to it's got a little bit at the base. A little warmer, but it's right at the base. And a little bit. And you can make it up because literally it's dappled light and you get a lot of variations. Add a little warm and we'll bring some light up here. This one, I don't see any light on. I can put it on there. I want to get light on this one for sure. And maybe up at the top on that one. That's working okay. I can add some darks to that thing and I think it'll help to this. Because it's foreground and I want to get, so any of those we can push a little bit of wonderful warm reddish down in here, back behind here, and then you get all kinds of wonderful colors and textures. So I'm gonna leave that for a second. We're gonna put some stuff. We're gonna go back and we're gonna get behind this guy so I can go into him and then finish off with the ground plane. And I got about 40 minutes.
Quick question.
Sure.
From Laurel, do you keep your dark values thinner or more transparent?
Yes, I do try to. I get thicker when I get lighter because I'm painting lights last, and you're laying your thicker paint on top in general. So if you think about it logically, that means I'm getting thicker on top. Basically, your lights, if you're going to get thicker paint, it's going to be in your lights. It isn't to say you can't. One of the reasons you don't want to go too thick with your darks is your darks pick up a lot of reflections, and it can be very detrimental in the long run. However, the old rule is more transparent in your shadows, in your dark, and more opaque as you bring your lights out. So I am doing that. But I must go back and tell you, the faster that I paint, the thicker I paint. So in some instances, I will throw a nice bold dark on top, thick, bold dark on top. And it has to do with the time frame more than anything. But you may do that and find you like it. Once again, painting in general is a discovery process. And we're all discovering things as we paint. Things that work, things that don't work. Well, I'm not going to do that again. It didn't work, that kind of an approach. Or, whoa, I like the way that, I'll keep that in my little arsenal of tricks, my little bag of tricks here in my head. And I'll hopefully be able to conjure that up and use it when the time comes and it works. Trying to get enough variation so that it doesn't become dull. So I'm working my way down behind him. And we'll put another, I got to get those in a little faster. I need to use my time more wisely. And sometimes if I paint a little faster, I'll paint better too. That's the other thing. I talk about energy and control. Energy is when you're painting quick and you're just powering paint down. And control is when you're being much more strategic, much more thoughtful and care. And the two together, if you can really harness that and learn how to use them to work with each other and not against each other, it can be a beautiful, beautiful way of painting. Again, you'll all discover if that's what you're after. You discover it by doing it. It's like one of our teachers said, Ho-Jun Lee. No, excuse me, Sung Kim, great, terrific painter. Says you get better, you'll learn how to paint, get better at painting by painting. I love that. He said it and I went, that's so simple, but it's so true. It's like you can watch somebody, you can watch me, you can watch another artist, and I've heard this before. Oh my gosh, you make it look so easy. It's not. It's not easy. It's never easy. We just have more experience, is all. And when you keep this up, someone will say that to you. Oh my God, you make it look so easy. That comes with experience. And I know Anna's experienced that. I remember her telling me when she was first teaching on site before she was teaching online. And all teachers kind of go through this. They're real apprehensive to kind of paint in front of somebody. I was too when I first started. And she did demonstration. I said, how'd it go? And she goes, it didn't go that well. But one of the students came up to me and said, my God, you make it look so easy. And so it's relative, you guys. It's all relative. It's not easy. And there's flaws that we all make. We all make them. And you just maybe don't see them because I'm not giving you the time to evaluate this piece. It's over in 90 minutes and I have the opportunity to look back on it and say, oh, I think I need to do a little. So sometimes I'll go back into these. I think last week I went back in and put about 15 minutes into the piece, mainly tree branches. And so, I could take it and turn it into an overall studio finished painting, but that isn't the intent when I started these. If I want to do that, I'll start from scratch and do a studio painting. So you see a lot of different green color variations in here. Okay, and there's some sneaking in from the other side. I'm getting a little bit, it's feeling okay. A little variation from here, and it's coming in from over in here. I got to get a little bit more terp into that paint because it wasn't sitting on top well. It was kind of intermixing. And there's a lot of busyness back in here. Swap it around. Don't be, again, make mistakes, please, and then correct them. Sometimes you're going to love your mistakes. Sometimes you put a color down and it doesn't work, and all of a sudden you look at it a little later and you go, hell, I kind of like that. So be careful about when you evaluate your own work, because it may be coming out a lot better than you think. And we can get so tied up in our reference. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. We get so tied up in our reference. And I've tried to make the point is when an individual looks at your painting, they don't see your reference. They see your painting. So what's important is how good your painting looks. not how much it replicates your reference. And that's the advantage of getting away from your work for a while. You get away from your work and you see it differently. And just adding a lot of character, color characteristics. I think I have way too much showing in there. I can go back to those background trees, which I think are somewhere in this range. And I'm painting negative now. Negative meaning that the yellow are the vines that I'm leaving. Okay, I'm going to grab this little brush. We're going to start going back to my figure in a second. I'm going to grab a little brush with some red-orange kind of color. A lot of Terp, because I'm painting on wet paint, and I need to give some characteristics in here. Linear, almost linear characteristics, and then I'll lose them. You put them in and you take them out. You put them in, you hide them. I like to say. It's like think of it this way. You put a tree trunk in, and then you bring the foliage over it. Same thing. Paint behind, and then paint your whatever is happening back on top of it. And some of the darks that I've painted, I see them peeking out. They come out every now and then. Busy. I see right here more kind of dirty color. If I have one area and it's too simple, the problem with that is it looks undone. So you've got to get enough. You have to let your eye travel throughout your painting and see how you feel about all these different areas, because you're going to see them at different times. And you're painting, you think, well, I got it, and then you kind of revisit that area, and you go, geez, I left that out. So, okay, I'm going to paint, trying to get him going, and then we're going to get some ground plane information going on, which you can do with a lot of different ways. I grabbed a knife here, and I'm just going to do a little scraping. I kind of like what's happening. Oh, I like that too. One of the things about working with a knife, you guys, they make marks that you can't get with a brush. And so they have something to offer. And it's worth messing around with if you haven't done it before. You may hate it, because if you're the kind of person that likes your painting to be neat and in control all the way through, you would truly not like working with a knife. But if you're a little bit more of a adventurer, a little bit more of an explorer in terms of your own art, you may absolutely fall in love with it. Okay, I'm going to take this little egbert here, and I'm going to mix up white, Naples yellow light, because I want there to be a very warm and enough medium in there, because we're going to paint the lights on this guy, and then I'm going to paint the shadow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here, and so I'm going to paint from here, and I'm going to create the shadow pattern with the lights. Lights are quite thick. I don't know if you can see that. This is part of the control process. When I talk about energy and control, this is thoroughly control. I still want them to have character and energy, but it is very much control. The energy happens partly because of the brush I'm using and the thickness of the paint. After you put a couple strokes down, you have to reload your brush, because you're picking up, as you deposit paint, you're also picking up paint. And so it can get really dirty quickly and very muddy. see a little bit of warmth. So I added a little bit of that orange, and because I see it get a little warmer as it moves back into this kind of region. Let's go back up here. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for a second. It's not as accurate as I want it, but I don't care because I've got to keep moving. So I see light happening right. Oh, look at the light up here. I just caught this. Beautiful. Little dapple. Little dapple of light up on the sleeve. It's one of the things I love about this subject is that wonderful light. As it's low light, it's early, like 6 in the morning, and the sun's coming up, so light's low and it's kind of peeking through the vines. It's beautiful. My only problem when I was photographing these guys is some of them liked the fact I was taking pictures and they wanted to pose. They turn around and smile at me. And I'm trying to explain to them, no, I want you in action. I'm interested in what you're doing. And there's a little light back on that back arm right there and there. And right before you get into the glove, I'm going to actually put a little light on that glove too. But on the sleeve, I see it up. I see it there. Bigger piece of light. And the light doesn't have to be 100% accurate, you guys, because if a leaf and vine moves, it's going to make a different kind of a shadow anyway. So you want it to feel correct. And that goes back to what I was saying about when an individual looks at your painting, they see your painting. They don't see the reference. They don't see, and that goes true, same is true with plein air. If you're painting on location and you move a tree, remove a tree, there's a house there, but you didn't want the house in the picture. No one cares. If your picture looks good at the end, that's what we as artists are designers. And we are designing our environments. We're using what nature offers us, as I said, but we're at the same time, we're picking and choosing. Yeah, I'm going to use that. Oh, I love the way that happens. Oh, I'm not going to put that in there. So we're going to hold that for right now. Now I'm going to take the shadow of his face and make it a lot warmer. It's a combination of alizarin and a little bit of a cat. Whoa, little, I kind of like that. I don't mind that. And he's going to have an ear up here. I can see where his ear is. So adding a little bit of warmth to that shadow helps a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little piece of light, and I can see a little piece of light, kind of a cat red light mixed into the naples. And we're going to put it right maybe on the top of his ear. Whoops, a little bigger than I wanted. Maybe down on his cheek. Put a little spot on there. So we have a little light hitting on his face there. So now we're going to deal with kind of some of the shadows and what happens in his back. And light comes from, you have skylight from above, correct? Skylight's up here. So warm light is affecting the under part of this, but skylight, and so what we're getting is a lot of these areas tend to get a lot more blue. So I mixed up kind of a really nice, kind of a medium dark blue-gray. And we're pulling in some of the skylight as it affects some of the folds. So what you're doing, and it goes back to that wonderful question that someone asked about values and colors and how many. Well, you start with the base and then you build. And you can build as many as you see. You use the logic. I'm using logic. I'm using physics if you think about it, because literally things that are being lit from above are influenced by the blue of the sky. If sunlight isn't hitting it. If sunlight is hitting it, that's a different story. Because sunlight powers out anything else. But the skylight is a very nice, soft, subtle accent. So what we're going to do, and then you can see it gets real strong back here. This is more filtered up in here, skylight, so it's not quite as bright. But up in here on the shoulder, on his back, and we'll kind of bring some of that, as I did before, back here and there, down. So we're augmenting that base color that I laid in with the influence of that blue sky. Okay, now I'm going to go brighter, just to add more white to that same color. You got to keep it loose. So it gets a little brighter on the shoulder. I can see it right here. As it comes down to his back. And then it gets a lot brighter because he doesn't have anything interrupting it. But it's very cool. It's not as bright as this, but it's right about, I'm going to put my little fingernail down here so I have a little more control. Same color with white in it. Probably don't have enough white. I'm probably going to put a little bit more white into it. Let's try it again. So we got skylight coming down and hitting his back now. Now, look down on his pants. Pants are black, but black can be lit too. It just has, the lights aren't as bright. So I see a little bit of light right in there, and they tend to be a little on the warm side. And you can use a lot of umber to light some of your blacks. So we get a little bit there, there, down on the leg. A little bit of that dapple that kind of hits in, same back in here. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone. I don't want to go too far with it. I can see I can get a little brighter if I want, just a little bit. So let's see what happens if I do right about it in here. I want it. Okay. Now let's build lushness as much as I have time for, and light on the ground. Let's do the light on the ground first. I'm going to go back to the Spielberg here. And I'm going to take kind of ochre, Naples, a little cad red light, white, and I'm going to start testing. That looks okay. Let's try some more. Go with more cad red light. Let's get a little bit of this. Comes up to him, really. And I know that if I need to, I can take that light. So I can actually come back if I need to, right at the last minute, and pop a few of these. Now, as it comes down a little lower, you get a lot of those red leaves happening in there. And I'm looking for as many little variations that I can get into this thing. I'm going for broke now. That's almost pure cad red light. I need more darks in there. I squinted my eye and I can feel it. I need a little bit more. if I interrupt and mess the pants up, but I do want some continuity. Let me explain what I mean by that too, because that sounds kind of weird. Continuity means I want that light to rake over here. So that light that starts there, I want to make sure I do a follow through it and it picks up over here. And then maybe even goes a little bit behind it. And then we're going to find back in here, we have a lot of light happening right here, a lot of light, and it's from this area. And what that allows me to do is show off his back. And I messed it up drawing wise. The shape is a little off. Don't be afraid, fix it. Okay. And behind this vine here, I can see this is where it's, I'm going to paint through through a few vines. There, I see. Now, in that area, there's the gentleman is, and there's a lot more light happening, right? I can just see it, right? There. Doesn't always have to be the same color. Keep it similar, but it doesn't have to be the same color. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of light on the ground right here. Didn't like the shape, so you change the shape. So we get a little piece of light happening there. It's a little bit of light above it. I'm picking up on all this stuff like right about in here. Yeah, about there. It doesn't have to be the same spot. You can move it. Remember, light can be coming through anything. So if you need to enhance something, I'm doing a little brush there. You can enhance something. The light that hits on the ground here, as it gets closer to him, it is brighter and whiter. So I'm going to take my maples and my white, and I'm going to get a little brighter. And I think back in here, I'm going to do the same thing. So you're adjusting. Now, some beautiful lights. I got to keep my, what do we got? About 15, 20 minutes almost. I'm going to pull some light right about here. Let it skip a little bit.
I like the expression, beautiful piece of light. But Bill had a question.
Sure.
When you're finding your brushes becoming muddy, do you have any suggestions how to keep that from happening? Do you clean or change brushes?
You change brushes and you clean. Yes. And I keep a rag particularly when I'm painting on location. This is as big a tool as this. I'm using my rag as much as I'm using my brush. So yes, you switch brushes and you clean them. One thing that a lot of artists do, I do it, I didn't do it today. I try and keep some brushes for lights and some brushes for darks. And it's easier to switch colors if you're not switching values radically. If you're switching values radically, then it becomes a little more difficult. There's a nice big power piece. See, if I mess these vines up, you have to be willing to, because you can go back and fix those hopefully quickly, but you can't, like it gets real red around them. So this almost a pure cad red or cad red light. Don't be afraid to let these colors get a little too crazy and then bring it back under control if you need to. So you can kind of feel the light starting to hit on the ground up in here. I do want to be able to, I'm still going to use a lot more of it. And as it goes in the background, you still have that little kind of pattern of light. So I'm going to, and they're back in here, back. And I've half the time I just make this stuff up. You start to get a rhythm going and it feels good. And you just say, okay, I'm going to, because you begin to realize that light can happen almost anywhere because it's coming through vines. And it helps ground it. If you, hopefully you're noticing. I want to bring his arm out a little bit by adding more light there.
Just want to try to get.
See, it helps bring him out, and that's kind of what I was doing. Also, there's more of a Naples into it, so it's not a flat, clean color. It's a lot of colors. Now I mentioned I'm going to move a little bit down in here, a little bit more over in here because there's a lot of little light passages. I could also, by the way, this can be the fun part because you can change all the time. If things are not going well, you just paint over it. And what comes through underneath sometimes really adds character. It adds interest and character to your piece. I don't like that spot right there. It's a big, heavy, dark area. And I'm not looking at my reference. Because I've eliminated that character back there. Now, going back with pure Naples and white. I'm going to throw some clean yellow into that too, by the way, and solvent-free gel. Oh, love it. Pretty color. A little bit more white. Was feeling a little too intense, so this is where I was talking to you earlier about don't be afraid about messing up too much because you can come back over. And I'm adding, some of this stuff is very textural now. But and more white. And as it goes up very often, I painted enough of these, very often it gets really bright up here. Value-wise. Then it's very near white. Nice, thick, gooey brush strokes. I could sit and layer this forever. It's one of those things. Sometimes I'll do it and I'll go back the next day and go, oh, I'll put another layer on. And it gives a richness to the piece. Over in here, there's some worms too, which I haven't. Oh man, I'm seeing all kinds of fun stuff, you guys. This is a very busy piece. Got a lot going on. But I just got my liner out, and I'm just catching a couple of these little vines that are in here. Up there, looks like there's one up here. Some worms. There's a beautiful kind of a reddish tone right in there. Those are standing out too much. I'll show you what you do with how you fix that. Let them stand out. I'm going to put some of the color back into this. So we're looking through it a little bit more. So it's not quite as dense. Now, I mentioned that those two areas bothered me, that I just put those two strokes in and they stood out too much. That's very easy. You just kind of trim it down. So they're kind of hidden more. It's a little bit more how they are. And I can see little beautiful pieces of light up in here, coming down here. It's very busy. So what you're doing is you're creating that, and I've used it in the past. I use the term activity. You're creating that activity.
So there was a question earlier from Laurel. Are you adjusting and softening the edges towards the back, or mainly just getting the depth through your color and
Depth through color. I'm not softening the edges back there. It's the depth. Any depth I'm getting is literally through color. Some of that is a choice and some of it is time. I don't have the time to sit there and, soften edges. But in something like this, I don't want those edges to be all that soft. I want them to be, I want there to be some, I call it the power of paint. And I want that power of paint to come through. Some of it is just working with your brush and creating the different kinds of characteristics that you're trying to achieve. It's the fun, like I said, this is the fun stuff. You can go on and play, build, overbuild, realize I've overbuilt. Now I'll go back and I'll get rid of some stuff, and you layer, and a layering can add incredible amounts of richness to your painting. How are we doing? Oh, we're doing okay. Got about 10. Now I can see darks that I need in there too. Also, there's a lot of, I'm going to grab my, haven't used it all day, have I? I am now. Show you why. I just figured this will give me more varied characteristics and almost lacking kind of some control to them up in some of this area up in here where I just kind of stab it in there and push it around. And then if it doesn't work, use get some more ochre. A little bit more medium. Get some weeds. Don't like that at all. I'm going to use all kinds of little things here at the end. I'm going to use my liner, and I'm going to pull, every now and then I'm going to pull a weed in with a liner. I don't want to do too much because it gets real contrived if you do. See a little green I can throw in there, like a leaf. There's a beautiful kind of green, gray green. Right there. And you can use, so I'm coming in at the end with a little, I call them power plays here with my knife, where I'm just laying paint on. The other thing you can do, I've done this before, so you can give kind of some of those characteristics. You just keep building on the ground, because the ground is rich. It's not clean and neat and a flat color. There's all kinds of interesting variations going on. And again, this relates to the question that was asked earlier about colors and values. you build off of that base that you put. If you don't get the correct base value, particularly, the color's a little off, it's one thing, but if you don't get that correct base value, no matter what you do to this thing, it is really not going to work very well. So you need that strength of the base right at the beginning. And there is once again, a really neat kind of, it's a dark reddish brown, got 5 minutes. And it comes across here. Not those. Okay. I needed more medium. It was too dry. There. And then it comes out. Well, before I do that, I'm going to add a little bit of green variation back in there. Not a lot, just a little bit. And so some of these leaves have a little bit of a lighter quality. So you vary the greens. I mean, right at the beginning, if you guys remember, I said don't kind of use the same color, just keep varying it. So we're going to I'm going to use my little finger here as a guide, but we're going to come down in here and let it almost disappear behind a leaf. Come out again. So we've got kind of a little bit of that feel. Now I can see other little lines that are kind of twigs and vines that are in here. And you layer, you're layering one over another. I can back in here. The trees that I laid in the background, right at the very beginning of this. If you recall, first of all, I'm going to hit a little bit of weeds and get him to, so he's kind of in the weeds here. I mentioned that it was probably a little bit darker than I wanted. And so what I did here is I just took that gray green and I mixed a little bit of Naples yellow into it. And I'm just going to kind of indicate feeling of lights on those trees, but very loose, very, very free. There's some worms in there too. I just picked up a little bit of a cad red light into that same kind of color. Now you could be as meticulous as you want with this. Again, I'm usually pretty free. I'm a little freer than I would be. This is a little bit looser than I would probably paint on my own if I were doing this as a studio painting. I would be being a little bit more careful. So I'm using probably more what you would call energy and less control. But I'm using that in a spot where I think it's not as important, if you follow me. The other thing is you can always come back with the sky, that original sky. If you lay a tree in and it isn't quite what you want, then you take this color, which is what we started with, and you kind of cut back in sky holes. So you're working all around the piece. Okay, so we do that. Let's see if there's anything else that I want to hit. Yeah, I do want to clean up a little bit on the, where's my film? Oh, it's in my hand. A little bit on the, we had about a minute. So a little dap of light back there too. I just caught it. Didn't see it right on this. A little bit of light right there. And then right there. And it spills down to the inside, right in there. But what I wanted to do was clarify this, be a little bit more accurate, because it's brighter. It's a little bit of a handle here. A little cleaner. Oh, it's just cleaning it up. That's all. Just kind of cleaning it up. It looks like on the back when there's a little dap of light, I could add more if I want, but I see a little light right here. And I think I'm going to add a little light back there, just to kind of bring those out. The other thing is I think I can emphasize that by letting a little light sneak back behind it. And we just hit all this kind of stuff as much as you can. You just play with it. Right there. I'm going to take a shadow, bring the shadow back in over that light because the light looked like it was too thick. So we're going to kind of hit that. We want a dark weed or two kind of coming in front of it. Same here. So you hit as much of that as you possibly can. Hopefully what you guys got out of this is a lesson in dealing with kind of a complex, colorful subject matter. It's more complex. There's a lot going on. I'm going to push this one more time for a little bit lighter. Soften the edge. Get that. And then soften the edge on his back a little bit, right? So it isn't quite so harsh. The last thing, and I'm quitting. I didn't get his, he's got a hood. He's wearing a hoodie. And a lot of these guys do, you know, they're in and out of these leaves. They either have hats or hoodies. And if it gets hot, they take their hat off, flip the hoodie up. So let's get that hood about there. And to get it to read, we just take the leaves behind it. There are some, and they're kind of changing color at this particular time. And voila, we got the hoodie to read better. And then we go back and clean up one last time on the shoulder. So we bring that in front. I told you I was going to do one thing and I didn't do it. Towards the end where I messed up some of these, I'm just going to come back over the vines and clean them up where I made some of the strokes. Maybe just the front vines. The back vines I could care less about. I want them to kind of get lost a little bit. But if I need to clarify and I could strengthen, I could add a little bit more power, a little bit more color to some of those vines. Anyway, you guys, I hope this helped. It's pretty complex, so I'm going to try and make things a little simpler on myself next week and not attempt something so complicated. But I hope you get the idea of dealing with a complex subject with interesting kind of dappled lighting and a lot of color variation. This is very different than the one I did last week, which was much more in a narrow color and value range. In any event, there's my vineyard worker. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. I always get something out of it, and I want to thank everybody. I also want to thank all those guys at the Academy that are helping with this. You guys are huge help.
There you go. Stay healthy, everybody.